Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here, your source for gaming, tech, emulation, and open source news, and sometimes reviews. In this video, we're taking a look at a webcam, the OBSBOT Meet 2. Let's get started. Alright, to kick things off, OBSBOT sent me the Meet 2 webcam for a fair and honest review, and that's exactly what we're going to do here. So taking a look inside the box, and the very first thing I see here is an instruction manual, mini in size, mighty in sight. And then underneath that, we've got the webcam and some other stuff. Not surprised here, this webcam is super tiny, and we'll go over that in just a second. The mount here is magnetic, it's fairly lightweight, and it is pretty flexible. I would say based on other mounts I've seen, this is a pretty standard mount, although this mount does not contain any threads. The threads are on the base of the camera if you wanted to mount it to a tripod. Interestingly, the camera comes with a separate lens cover. The OBSBOT branded metal lens cover attaches to the lens via a magnet. And it does stick on there pretty good, but at the same time here I would say this is at big risk of being lost. Also included is a USB-C to USB-C cable and a USB-C to USB-C-A adapter. Now if you're curious, the Meet 2 attaches to the monitor mount via a magnet. I'm a big fan when webcams use magnets. Although I will say the magnet on this one is not very strong. So here's a better look at the Meet 2. Now the Meet 2 is a lot smaller than I thought it would be. I really like the color here. The LED is on the top right hand corner. I believe the two holes on the bottom are for the microphones. And there is the threaded base, so you can see if you needed to attach it to a tripod or something. And here is the back of the camera, so you can see it's rated at 5 volts and 0.5 amps. It does attach via USB-C. So right now you're seeing me through the OBSBOT Meet 2 with default settings. I've just plugged the camera in, and that's literally about it. I've got a whole bunch of lights on right now. I've got my standard YouTube lights on, and I've also got my ceiling lights on. So what I'm going to do is just turn off my YouTube lights and see what happens. So now I've gone on ahead and turned off my YouTube lights. I have 3 lights altogether, one on the left side, one on the right side, and one right behind the camera. When they're all on and the brightness is cranked, it is a little bit hard to see, but at the same time here it does a really good job of illuminating things. And you can see with just overhead lights in this room here, my face is a little bit dark. It's a little bit dark underneath my eyebrows, and well, this is not necessarily optimal, but I would say this is a regular setup for a whole lot of people. So at this point in time, I've gone on ahead and turned off all of the lights in the room. The only thing illuminating me right now is, well, the light behind me there as well as the screen. You can kind of see my hand a little bit, but the camera is not picking up my face from the light from the screen at all. So from here, let's turn on the lights and see how the camera does with changing light. So I would say this is a pretty low light situation. The frame rate still seems okay. Everything seems okay. The camera doesn't seem to be struggling. I'm actually going to turn off that light there and just see how things go. And again, just with one light on, the camera is still doing a pretty good job here. I'm not noticing a whole lot of noise on the screen. So what I'll do from here, I guess, is just turn on the other 2 lights and see what happens. Alright, so you're looking at me with just the YouTube lights on, and that is all. The overhead lights are off, and I think it's doing a pretty good job at adjusting. Again, I'm not noticing a whole lot of latency, and on top of that, the frame rate still seems relatively fine. So the camera is doing a good job at picking up my image here with the changing light, and although I couldn't see myself in the lower light, I was surprised with the lack of noise. Now again, those were all default settings, so I've opened up the OBSBOT Center just to see what we're dealing with here. The Meet 2 has been detected by my PC. If I click these 3 buttons here, I can upgrade the firmware on the camera. And over here, I've got camera controls. So all I'm going to do now is click output just to see what I'm dealing with. And I can see that the video is set to 1080p 60 by default. I can crank it right up to 4K 30 or put it down to 720p. And taking a look as well, I've got preview for landscape or portrait. Video encoding is set to hardware, there's software as well. Recording bitrate, I can go low or high, and recording format MP4 if I wanted to record with this program. Now for reference, I am using OBS to record, not this program, and we'll see what happens here if I change this to 4K 30, if it changes the webcam at all that I'm currently recording with. Nothing seems to have been changed, so I'm guessing here that these settings are limited right to this program and this program alone. So I think the most important camera settings will be from this OBSBOT Center, and the software settings window is great for updating firmware, but I'm not going to use it for recording. So let's take a look here to see what I can do. It does have auto framing. I'm going to turn that on here and let's see what happens. I'll do close up and, well, nothing is really happening with that camera yet. I'll click upper body. Oh, there we go. So this is changing something. Click back to close up, group mode. I'll turn off auto framing, see what happens. Didn't do anything. And I can move the camera. This is very interesting because the camera is not on a gimbal, but I can move it up and down. So I think it just shifts the frame here just a little. I mean, I am zoomed in a little bit. I can manually zoom that out. It's probably not going to move around now. But if I zoom it in, let's see how much I can zoom this in. Crank it right up. You can see my face here. Hello, hello. Okay, so it's not necessarily, well, it's not on a gimbal or anything, but at the same time here, I think this is all right for what it is. This is kind of a nice feature if you wanted to zoom in and use these controls. Additionally, at the bottom here, we've got wide, medium, and narrow. So I'll click on that and, well, I can really change the perspective here. And then just reset to reset things. I don't think that resets the view though. No, it doesn't. All right, so let's see what else we can do here. We can go to the image. Autofocus is on. Autofocus mode is global or face. See what happens when I do global. So one thing I did note here when I was on Linux and using this camera on Linux, and I'll talk about it in just a second, the autofocus was very active to a fault. If I moved around on camera a lot, it kept focusing and couldn't maintain a steady focus. So to test out the autofocus, I'll show the lines on my forehead here in the camera. I'll move around and we'll see if you can still see them as I'm moving around. Yeah, it's doing an okay job. So I think it just works better in Windows than it does in Linux, and we'll cover that in just a sec. Now I'm going to switch the focus to global, and we'll see what happens here when I hold up a box real close to the camera. And pull it away, and well, focus is pretty quick. Not bad. I'll keep it on face here and see what happens when I pull this up to the camera. Basically the exact same. Now, interestingly here, auto exposure is shut off by default. The shutter speed is at 60 frames per second. The ISO is all the way down at 500. So I'm going to turn on auto exposure, and that really brightens things up. I think way too much. I kind of like having the autofocus or the auto exposure off. To me, this is just too bright. So we'll keep that down the way it should be. This looks more natural, and well, we'll go from there. So let's scroll down just a little bit here and check out the white balance. So by default, it is set to auto, but I can turn that off and warm it up or cool it down. Now, one thing I've noticed with other OBSBOT cameras is it goes from blue to red, kind of cold to hot, and there isn't a nice yellow in between, but this to me warms things up real nice. Now, I can warm up the image just by changing the light colors, but at the same time here, if you don't have that option, you can warm it up just a bit by the temperature here and manually do it. And I would say it does an okay job. There's still some red undertones that I'm not liking. I mean, I'm a ginger, but at the same time here, overall, I would say you probably just want to leave this at auto, and this looks much more natural. Now, the last tab here is more, so I can control device sleep, automatically put it to sleep if it's not in use. I might just turn that off. And then let's check out auto framing and also zoom. So this does have gesture control. So if I hit this button here to do auto framing, oh, there we go. Not too bad given the fact that it's not on a gimbal. That's kind of impressive. And let's try zoom. Now, zoom is sometimes hit and miss with some of these cameras, so let's check this out. If I go up, is that out? Or if I go down, is that in? Zoom in, zoom out. Try again. I don't know. So zoom, I'm just going to take off and probably just reset the camera angle here. I'm going to turn off gesture controls too because I'm just not a big fan of them. And on a quick side note here, there is an HDR option. I missed this one, but by default it is disabled. So let's turn that on and see the difference. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on whether or not the HDR is better or worse than the standard picture. Now, throughout this video, you've been listening to me through the Electro Voice RE20, which is a very expensive microphone. So let's switch over to the OBSBOT microphone and see how that sounds. I don't have my hopes up, but this will be the included microphone on that OBSBOT Meet 2. So at this point in time, you are hearing me through the internal audio on the OBSBOT Meet 2. Now, you might be hearing some laptop fan noise, and that's because the laptop is in with close proximity to the camera, and there's nothing I can do about that. So taking a look here at the options. So it says here, noise reduction is weak. So let's turn that off. And do you hear any difference in my voice? Let's turn that on medium now. And do you hear any difference in my voice? Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. And we'll turn it on strong. And let's see if you hear any difference in my voice now. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. So let's turn that noise reduction back to off. And let's change the radio distance from close to standard. Let's see what happens. Do you notice any difference in my voice now between what it was and what it is? And let's change it to far and let me know if you hear any voice difference between what it was and I guess what it is now. And I'm going to change the noise reduction from off to strong. So now the noise reduction is strong and I'm going to change that radio distance from far to close and let me know if you hear any differences. Now, if you remember earlier on in this video, I said I was using the default settings, which happened to be 1080p 60. I tried to change them, but that was just for the recording settings. So let's scroll down here and manually change these in OBS, which is the program I'm using to record. So it is set to device default. I'll select custom here. And then it is set to 1080 60 frames per second. I'll just double check to make sure it's set to 60 frames per second. And now let's bump it down to 720p and see what happens. So here is the video quality difference between 1080p and 720p. And let's bump this up to 4K. Now I'm recording in 1080p because my laptop does not support 4K recording, but this is what the camera looks like when it's set to 4K mode. So here's the video at 4K 30, 30 being the maximum FPS at this quality. Now I'm noticing a tiny bit of latency, just a tiny bit. And that's probably because the camera's pushing a lot more data to my PC. It is connected via USB-C, not USB-A. And that is, well, I would say it's performing better than some other cameras I've tested out at 4K 30, even some at 1080p 60. So let me know your thoughts at 4K 30 in the comments below. Personally, I think 1080p 60 is the sweet spot if you are doing any sort of moving around on camera. Or just in general, I just find 60 frames per second is a lot easier on the eyes and more pleasing. So for comparison, again, I'm back to 1080p 60, and in my opinion, I like the smoothness of this. I like the overall picture. And I like it in 1080p 60 mode a lot better, but I could be of the minority here. Let me know your thoughts about that. Now, on a side note here, if you are not using OBS and you're using something else, I don't know, like MS Teams or something, and wanted full control of your camera, you can use the OBSBOT Center and utilize that. So there's an option here for virtual camera. If you click it, you'll turn on the OBSBOT virtual camera and it will be using the OBSBOT Center to control it. So for this example, I will be using OBS again, but it's basically the exact same on any program that uses a webcam. Under device, it does say OBSBOT Meet 2 Stream Camera, but if I wanted to use that OBS Center and the virtual camera, I just switch it to OBSBOT Virtual Camera. And well, you can see now I'm up here on screen and it is using the virtual camera from OBSBOT. So if we head back into the software settings menu that I was on before for the OBSBOT, you can see I was trying to change this before from 1080p 60 to 4K 30, if you remember. Now I'm going to change it to 4K 30, and since we're using the virtual camera, it should automatically change. And it seems as if it is. I am noticing though quite a bit of latency, even more so than when I changed it through OBS. And that is, well, you can't see it from my perspective, but from my perspective, I can see latency. So we'll see here if hardware or software encoding changes any of that. And I don't think it's going to, but we'll see how it goes. No, it seems to be the exact same here. So I'm going to put it back to hardware encoding and then change the resolution back to 1080p 60. where it seems to be performing best on my PC. Again, I could be wrong. Let me know your thoughts about how it performs in the comments below. Do you like 4K 30 or do you like 1080p 60? So here's the OBSBOT Meet 2 up and running on Linux, and everything seems to be okay, but when I try to change anything, sometimes the camera will just completely crash out. And for some reason too, the AI in this camera does not like the green screen when I raise that behind me. So again, these are default settings for the camera, and you can see right away the white balance is struggling a little bit when there's the presence of green directly behind me. It is fluctuating, and when I try to set it manually, it will crash the camera from time to time. On top of that, the focus is also seeming to struggle. So watch when I approach the camera and watch the lines on my forehead. So I don't know why this is so different between Linux and Windows, but it just seems that the camera is just not functioning that great on Linux. Now, if you just needed to plug and play and just need a camera to show your picture, yeah, this is absolutely fine. So I mean, I'd say the camera is not really designed for Linux. Does it work? Yes. Is it usable? Arguably, yes. But if you do need to customize anything, that's kind of where this camera falls short. Now it does, just the white balance is off a little bit. The colors are off a little bit. I'll try changing stuff and show you what I mean. All right, so I've got the camera properties up, and the first thing I'm going to do is turn off white balance automatic, and this might crash out the camera. Yep, it completely crashed out the camera. Now I'm going to try to change this from BGR3 to motion JPEG to try to restart things, and the camera is still crashed out, so I'm going to have to restart OBS. So unfortunately, I'm just stuck with this image here on Linux, and there's nothing much I can do about it. And again, that's not great for me, but maybe it's good for someone else who just needs a camera. But again, this is a more premium camera. Now, taking a look at the price on Amazon, and the OBSBOT Meet 2 is currently priced at $129 with a 5% coupon. Now, taking a look at that price, let's get into my likes, my dislikes, and whether or not I'd recommend it. And we'll start out here with my likes. First and foremost, I like the 1080p 60 performance. I think 4K 30 is pushing this a little bit. I think 1080p 60 is the sweet spot for the camera in terms of overall performance. I like the plug and play settings of this camera, which is a real big feature. The camera is nice and small and compact, so it doesn't take up a lot of space on top of my monitor. I like the OBSBOT features that were built in on the app, and I like how the app functioned in order to update the camera, control the camera, and just tinker around with things. Now moving into my dislikes, and my biggest dislike here is the performance at 4K 30. Now I know this camera is marketed at 4K 30, but at the same time here, I think it's just pushing the camera a little bit too much. And I also didn't like the fact that this camera really isn't that compatible with Linux. It does not like to be tinkered around with at all within Linux for some reason. However, I do have to be fair here, and OBSBOT did not market this camera to work on Linux, so I can't really fault them at all for that one. It's just a personal preference. Now at $129, almost $130, would I recommend this camera? And the answer is, if you like the picture and like what you saw in this video, then absolutely yes. I mean, I think at $129 for a solid 1080p 60 frames per second, and I guess 4K 30 if you're looking towards that, yeah, this camera offers quite a bit. The sensor on this one's a 1/2-inch sensor. I thought the low light performance provided you with light on your face was pretty good. I would say it holds its own in terms of low light capabilities, in terms of non-ideal light capabilities, and also in terms of perfect lighting capabilities. I would say this camera performs on par with some much more expensive ones. At $129 for a webcam of this caliber, I think it's pretty good. But truthfully, the overall opinion isn't mine on this, on whether or not you should buy it. It's yours. Did you like what you saw here? Did you like the frame rate? Did you like the picture quality? Did you like everything about the camera, or didn't you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below here. That is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and no fluff. So shoutouts to OBSBOT for providing me this Meet 2 for a fair and honest review. Again, let me know your thoughts about it in the comments below. If you like this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button. Check out my other videos. Don't tempt fate. Save your state.